altogether, we were on the Siegfried Line for about 3 weeks, and my memories of that are pretty much blurred. It was mostly mud and cabbages, and every now and then we did have a slight move forward, but for the most part we were just in the foxholes, usually filled with water.
American soldiers, on the whole, I believe, find it very difficult to hate. We spoke of the Germans and thought of the Germans as our enemy, but there was no such thing as violent hatred.
The non-commissioned officer in the American Army is unique. He has to be the leader of his men, but many of the men under him can also be leaders.
One of the chief problems that faces any replacement officer is measuring up to the opinions the men had of the officers that commanded them before.
And after we got all the battalions settled down in their foxholes for the night, I dug out a pair of blue silk pajamas that my wife had insisted that I put in my bedroll, and put them on and crawled in my bedroll to sleep for the night. Of course, this news spread around over the battalion immediately, and my purpose was achieved because all of the men felt that if the old man had gotten in his silk pajamas and gone to bed, that certainly there was no trouble, or they weren't in great danger, so they relaxed and were able to get a good night's rest.
These are the men who served in the 84th Infantry Division, the division that distinguished itself in a series of critical engagements during World War II. Thus, this story could be the story of any infantry division where the uncommon virtues of courage, endurance, and self-sacrifice became the commonplace. By the beginning of November 1944, the defeat of Germany appeared imminent. To the east, Russian armies had pushed their way through Poland and the Balkans. To the south, Anglo-American forces were moving relentlessly up the Italian peninsula. To the west, Allied armies, having advanced through France and the Low Countries, now gathered along the borders of Western Germany.
Good old M1 rifle, semi-automatic, breech-loaded. Seems a lot heavier than it did 20 years ago. My name is John Shaw. I was with the 84th Infantry Division as a buck private during World War II. I was one of these ASTP boys, 3,000 of us shipped down to the 84th Division in April before we went overseas in 1944. And we were trained hard and sent overseas in September, and were in England for a while, and then we caught the Red Ball Express. And then before we knew it, we were right on the edge of the line, ready to go into combat. And we were all of us kind of wondering what things were going to be like. We could see the shells going off, we could hear them, and we were all sort of nervous, but I don't think anyone was really fully conscious and aware of what was going to happen.
The men of the 84th Division had managed to penetrate the enemy lines a few hundred yards east of the Dutch frontier. But the Siegfried Line barred the way to further advance. This fortified zone of tank traps, gun emplacements, and pillboxes had become a shield behind which weary German troops now assembled. General Siegfried Westphal, Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, had this to say of the situation.
It was
essential for the German High Command in the West
to gain time in order to re-equip the west fortifications, called Siegfried Line, for defense purposes. We had to make every effort, therefore, to see to it that our troops could maintain this position as long as possible.
Lange westlich dieser Siegfriedlinie, also noch in Belgien und Luxemburg, behaupten konnten.
The west fortifications had no weapons. The wire entanglements had been dismantled, and even some of the keys to unlock the rusty dugouts were missing. The defensive value of these constructions was so minimal that the soldiers preferred to live in a trench under the open sky rather than have the concrete ceiling collapse over their heads. We reported this to Hitler, who flew into a rage and retorted, "The whole world trembles in fear of this phenomenal achievement of German technology."
Die ganze Welt zittere vor diesem Wunderwerk deutscher Technik.
The 84th Division's immediate mission, part of a general offensive, was to crack the Siegfried Line at the town of Geilenkirchen, and then establish beachheads on the nearby Rohr River. Beyond lay the main objective, the Rhine.
I'm Lieutenant General Lewis W. Truman. During World War II, I was a colonel, Chief of Staff of the 84th Infantry Division, and Chief of Staff to Alexander R. Bowling, the Commanding General of the 84th Division. The intelligence which we received was of the very best. The individuals, clear down to the squad level, were indoctrinated, instructed exactly what their jobs were to be. There is no question but that we had very much confidence that we would be able to carry out this mission. I know also that the regiments, the battalions, the companies, and the platoons and squads had that same feeling of confidence.
The 84th Division would be supported by the British on the left and the American 2nd Armored and 102nd Infantry on the right. Facing them were several Volksgrenadier divisions and a number of crack Panzer units. At precisely 5 minutes to 7 on the morning of November 18th, an artillery barrage signaled the attack had commenced.
Geilenkirchen was about 3 miles away from where we were, and it so happened that our regiment was leading the attack, and happened to be in the first platoon of the first company, and I happened to be in the first squad of the first platoon, and so happened that I was the first scout. So I was first. And we came through a little woods and out onto a sports plot. So we shot across this clearing and into the outskirts of the town. And there was a trench there, and we walked up the trench, all of us feeling pretty happy at this point and pretty proud of ourselves for having gotten that far. And it seemed to me the whole company was strung out into one big line. And all of a sudden, a German in a window 3 blocks away opened up on our column in this trench with a machine gun. And of course, we all hit the dirt. And we just waited there for somebody to do something. Finally, a British tank lumbered up the street off to our side and fired 2 shells right into that window. And that was the end of that.
I'm Richard K. Hawkins. I was the first lieutenant with A Company 334th Infantry of the 84th Infantry Division. It was necessary for complete cooperation between various branches of the Army. And since it was necessary for the infantrymen to attack on foot, seize the ground and hold it, it was also necessary for artillery to neutralize these positions before the infantrymen jumped off. It was a wonderful show of cooperation between these different branches.
We got through Geilenkirchen and we started on the road that we thought was taking us right to Berlin. We felt great and we were pretty excited about being in the war. And after we'd gone about 500 yards up the road, the 88th started coming in. Like fools, we ran into a little wood, and all of us tried our best to dig into the ground. We used our hands that just tried to claw the dirt, trying to dig in. Meantime, these shells were coming into the trees and bursting all around us, and our friends were being hit, and we were screaming for medics. This lasted, it seemed, for about half an hour. I suppose it lasted about 5 minutes.
I am Fritz Kramer. I was with the 84th Division as a rather elderly soldier from my 35th to my 37th year. I do remember very clearly now the feelings we had, like all men who go into battle for the very first time. We were uncertain. We were very unsure of ourselves. We knew very well that combat was very different from training. And I remember this excitement, and I may frankly say, for all soldiers who may come after us, we were also full of fear. Not necessarily fear of the enemy, but fear of our own making it or not making it. How would we stand up? I think our general told us later that he had been praying in those hours when he committed the men he had trained for the first time for combat. I know now, and we all know now, that the battle went well and that our one regiment that was attached to combat-proven British forces did well, found the praise of the British, and we immediately gained an extraordinary increase in self-confidence. We had met the enemy, and while we certainly hadn't performed any great heroics, we felt our self-confidence greatly increased.